My husband, though, truly loves me. He tells me so often, and his smile brightens my day, while his kind words bring warmth to my heart. We've been married for 5 years, and I can still vividly recall the moment he asked me to be his wife. "I will love you forever," he said softly, his words filled with sincerity and promise. Those words filled me with joy, and I felt like the luckiest person alive. It wasn't just a vow. I could see in his eyes that he meant every single word. From that day forward, life felt like a beautiful dream. We were incredibly happy, spending our days laughing together, sharing secrets, and treasuring every moment. Our love felt like the kind you read about in romantic novels, the kind that seems everlasting. But as I sit here now, thinking back on those memories, something feels different. Life, once overflowing with joy, now feels as though that happiness is slipping away, bit by bit. Everything that used to feel so perfect now seems distant. Though he's constantly preoccupied with work these days, he wakes up early, grabs his phone, and rushes out without even saying a proper goodbye. I remember when things were different, when he would come home, no matter how long his day had been, with a big, cheerful smile on his face. Back then, he always made time for me. We'd sit together, talking about anything and everything, from our biggest dreams to the silliest moments of the day. He would pull me close, wrapping his arms around me, and in those moments, the world felt perfectly right. Now, everything has changed. Even when he's sitting beside me, it feels like he's miles away. His mind seems lost, buried in emails or phone calls, and I can sense the growing distance between us. I miss the way he used to kiss me so gently, as though I was the most important person in his world. I miss the warmth of his touch, how he'd hold my hand or drape his arm around my shoulders, making me feel safe and loved. His voice, once soft and soothing, now feels hurried and detached. He barely speaks, and when he does, it's quick and to the point, as if he's rushing to get back to his work. I miss the tender words he used to whisper to me, words that made me feel cherished, as though I was the center of his universe. When we got married, we were both so excited to start a family. We dreamed of having children and imagined the joy of little ones running around our home. We tried everything to make that dream a reality, but no matter what we did, it just wasn't happening. Month after month, we hoped for good news, but each time we were met with disappointment. We began to worry, wondering if something might be wrong. Maybe it was Tho. Maybe there was an issue we didn't know about. We decided to go to the hospital for tests, and the doctors checked everything, even running tests on Tho's sperm count to see if that might be the problem. When the results came back, the doctors assured us that everything was fine and that Tho didn't have any issues. That gave us hope, so we kept trying. Night after night we hoped this time would be different. We prayed and wished, longing for the moment we'd finally hear the sound of little feet in our home. Still, nothing changed. Each night, Tho would hold me close, and we'd silently hope that soon our dreams would come true. It was hard to keep our spirits up, but we tried to stay strong. I wanted to believe that someday I would carry our child, but with each passing day that dream seemed further out of reach. Though I kept holding on, clinging to the hope that one day everything would change. But for now, all we could do was keep trying and waiting, praying that our prayers would eventually be answered. After so many attempts and still not being able to have a child, we began to feel hopeless. Each day felt heavier, and the sadness was harder to bear. We longed for a child more than anything, yet nothing seemed to work. We visited countless doctors, tried different treatments, and prayed every night, but the outcome was always the same: no baby. One day, Tho and I sat down to discuss what we could do. We still wanted to have a family, to hear a child call us Mom and Dad, to fill our home with laughter and joy. After much thought, we came to a decision. If we couldn't have a child of our own, we would find another way to bring one into our family. That's when we started considering adoption. We knew it wouldn't be the same as having a biological child, but we also knew there were so many children in need of a loving home. We decided to adopt a son, hoping that this choice would allow us to experience the joy of parenthood. We wanted him to be part of our lives, growing up surrounded by love and care. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the right one. We would finally have a child to love, and he would have parents who would do everything to make him feel safe and cherished. The thought of being called Mom brought a smile to my face, and I hoped this path would bring happiness to our family, even if it wasn't what we had originally planned. One day, my husband had to leave urgently for work. It was an emergency, and he needed to travel out of state for 2 weeks. I understood, even though I knew I'd miss him terribly. Before leaving, he packed his bags, kissed me goodbye, and promised to call me every night. A week passed, and I began to feel incredibly lonely. The house felt far too quiet without my husband there. I missed the sound of his laughter, and the way he would hold my hand while we watched TV. Every room felt empty, and I found myself wishing he were back home. One sunny afternoon, my phone rang. Glancing at the screen, I saw my stepbrother's name. A small wave of excitement washed over me. We'd always had such a good time together. I answered the call. "Hey, I'm nearby," he said. "Mind if I stop by?" I smiled and replied, "Of course, I'd loved some company." Just the thought of having someone to talk to lifted my spirits. While I waited for him, I tidied up the living room. I straightened the cushions and wiped down the coffee table, feeling both nervous and happy. I wondered what we'd talk about when he arrived. Finally, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, there he was, smiling warmly. "It's so good to see you," he said, pulling me into a comforting hug. We sat down on the couch and started talking. We shared stories from our childhood, laughing at old memories. For the first time in days, I felt lighter, like the loneliness had temporarily disappeared. It was wonderful to have someone I could confide in, someone who made me feel understood. My stepbrother and I had always shared a unique bond. Ever since we were kids, we could talk about anything and everything. No matter what was happening in our lives, we knew we could rely on each other to listen and share our feelings. Having him visit felt like a much-needed reminder of those times. As we continued chatting and catching up, it felt like stepping back into the past. Being with him was easy and comforting, especially since I had been feeling so isolated while my husband was away. We talked about everything, from childhood adventures to how much our lives had changed over the years. The familiarity between us made the loneliness I had been feeling fade, at least for a while. But, as we talked, something shifted between us. The conversation moved from playful memories to deeper emotions. At first, I didn't even notice, but we were sitting closer than before. It felt strange yet comforting. The emptiness I'd been carrying since my husband left seemed to melt away the longer we talked. Before I knew it, our faces were just inches apart. We locked eyes, and suddenly, without thinking, we leaned in and kissed. It started gently, but inside I felt a wave of confusion and uncertainty. My heart was racing, and everything seemed to be moving so quickly. We paused briefly, but I didn't pull away. He spoke softly, reassuring me that everything would be okay, that this was our moment. Somehow, I found myself believing him, letting go of all other thoughts. One thing led to another, and we ended up in the bedroom, where everything changed. The moments that followed felt like a blur, yet they carried a weight I couldn't ignore. As we found ourselves together, the world outside seemed to pause. Time felt slower, and the room was filled with a stillness that was both comforting and intense. We were both nervous but didn't want to stop. He held me gently, and soon we were lying next to each other. The closeness was something I hadn't felt in a long time, and for a fleeting moment, nothing else seemed to matter. There was a connection between us that seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. The way he touched me, the way he looked at me, it all felt familiar, yet deeply emotional. We stayed close, enjoying a warmth that made us forget everything else. It was an intense moment, one that left me filled with emotions I couldn't fully understand. In the days that followed, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The weight of the secret I now carried grew heavier with each passing moment, and the guilt started to consume me. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had betrayed my husband, the man who had vowed to love me forever. When my husband returned from his trip, everything on the surface appeared unchanged. But deep inside, I knew things were different. Every time I looked at him, I wondered how long I could keep this secret. How long could I live with the guilt gnawing at my heart? My mind kept replaying that night, the choices I had made, and the consequences they could bring. Over time, I came to realize that this wasn't a path I wanted to continue down. The bond I shared with my husband mattered more to me than any fleeting moment of weakness. I knew that to find peace I needed to confront my decisions and face the truth no matter how difficult it would be. Standing at this crossroads, I understood that whatever I chose next would change everything. Would I summon the courage to confess and seek forgiveness, or would I carry this burden with me forever? Only time would reveal what path I would take.